The annual deadline is approaching for registration of rental properties in Boston. The registration was introduced in response to concerns about health and safety. To explain the program and how it works is our guest, the Commissioner of the city's Inspectional Services Department, William Christopher. Thank you very much for being with us, Commissioner.
Good afternoon.
First of all, given what generated this program, what would you say now has resulted that you think is a real plus for the city?
I think the direction towards data collection, to understand the actual number of units in the city and understand their makeup and geometries, has become a real important factor to us. Especially in light of the mayor's goals on housing, we have to understand what our existing housing fabric is as we move forward into the new generation of it.
Well, you have original building plans that were filed when something was put up, which could be maybe decades ago, but I guess those buildings change, and why is it so important to keep track of, let's say, a building that gets subdivided into extra bedrooms?
Well, there's a number of things. It's always about public safety, always making sure that units are being, subdivided or added to in a way that always provides a safe and clean environment for people. So that's the primary concern. The secondary part of it is to really understand how cities change. We have hundreds and hundreds of buildings that we don't have plans on. So this is a way for us to really update our database on the stock of housing.
Well, talk about how much worse it was before, because if somebody called in a problem in a building, or maybe your inspector just happened to notice something, you want to address the problem. You got to know who owns the property.
Oh, absolutely.
So if there was any lack of clarity about that, I guess that could really set you back.
One of the benefits of the registry program is the owner has to identify themselves. They have to give us their name, their contact information, and if they live out of state, they have to give us a reasonable person within the state that we can contact in the event of a problem. We have a few people at Inspectional Services that do nothing but title searches because there are still properties that have not registered with us, or they're not responding to us, so we have to research their titles to find out who the actual owner is. So that was one of the byproducts of this endeavor that is paying off tremendously.
Well, for some property owners, there's a requirement here for at least periodic inspections, but actually for some other owners, the inspections are not required, but the registration is required.
Yes, uniformly across the board, every unit has to be registered. Units, of 6 units or less that are owner-occupied don't have to go through the inspection. And then there's another program that we have, which is, we call it our 5-year plan, where if you're in good standing with the city, you have no outstanding violations or complaints, we will go out and inspect a percentage of your units, and if they pass, then we allow the entire building to be considered inspected.
Now, I know there is some fears originally that inspectors would go over each and every little thing and make this a burdensome kind of operation, but what's been the experience?
Well, we do go in and, the sanitary code is the base of all of our inspections, which is really the life safety of the building. That does happen on all of our inspections. But it's the situation where we try to work with our landlords to try to get these buildings up in operation. It doesn't win us anything to write violations, but to have buildings in compliance, excuse me, is a very big part of what we do.
Now, what about the people who might not have met the requirement for registering? And these are not necessarily negligent investor owners. It could be somebody who lived in the building and just maybe they're a little confused.
Well, we're trying very hard to do a whole public outcry on this. We've not last year, the year before, we did a tremendous media blitz where it was on billboards and very public presentation. Last year we used social media as our main vehicle. This year we're taking another approach where we're trying to simplify it as much as we possibly can. We're trying to attend meetings with church groups, to reach out to those people that aren't connected to the internet, that may not be involved in a lot of the social or civic activities. So we're trying to get the word out there as best we can. There are some people that have chosen to ignore us for some reason. We don't fully understand that. And after July 1st, there are penalties that are levied against their property. And that can end up on their tax bill at the end of the year if they don't respond to us. Or it can end up having them in housing court.
On the other hand, let's say you live in a 3-decker that you own, and you have to register, but actually, you're not subject to inspections necessarily, and there's no registration fee, I guess.
Right, no, that's absolutely true. But again, it's about collecting data so that we can understand, where these houses are, what properties are owner occupied, which ones are not. So it's a lot of that is the data collection, and the fees that we charge really are just to cover our costs to maintain a lot of the records and to do the physical inspections.
For people who are required to have an inspection, does this have to be by the city, or can they have somebody else do it? Is there much money involved in that?
No, the fees are all relatively about the same, but there are entities, private entities, that are trained by ISD that can go out and do these inspections, and we accept their inspections. And Department of Public Health, Public Housing, as their inspectors, we accept their inspections as well.
Well, for people who want to register, and let's say if they have the internet, I guess it's pretty easy, but if they don't have the internet, what do they do?
They can come down to 1010 Mass Ave on the 4th floor, and our staff will be very happy to sit down with them either at a computer and assist them to register online, or we'll sit down with paper and pen and do a manual registration for them.
I want to ask you about some of the other things you're doing to address some of the health and safety concerns you're hearing about. And in some neighborhoods, unfortunately, we still have too many rodents at large, and you found a new way to deal with that.
I would like to say that it was my idea, but it was not. It was being used at some of the universities, and one of the exterminating companies that is an actual vendor for the city of Boston had casually mentioned it to one of our assistant commissioners. He brought it to my attention in almost in a comical sense. He goes, they're using dry ice to kill rats. And I said, well, how do they do that? And so there was a little bit of an explanation. And we've been testing it now, and it works. Basically, what we're doing is in exterior burrows, we're literally filling the entrances and exits into the burrows with dry ice and collapsing in the top of the burrow. As it turns to carbon dioxide, it puts the rodent to sleep and eventually asphyxiates it, and it's already buried. So it was just such a simple process. I wish we could use it in larger open spaces, but we can't. So this is just one tool that we'll have to deal with this. But we use it in places like the Boston Commons, the public gardens, ball fields. We've used it in some of the oldest cemeteries in the city of Boston. We're going to, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to excavate one of these rodent burrows to see what actually is going on below grade. But right now, we go back to the burrow the next day, and 9 out of 10 cases, none of the holes have been reopened. So the rats are either dead or gone. And if we do find a case where a burrow has been reopened, we go through the same process again. But it's a very simple trick to solve a problem.
Well, for smaller property owners, one thing you do is you call the exterminator, but otherwise, any advice you might have, especially for prevention?
Yes. We run programs. We ran one last year in Chinatown called Block to Block, where we went out and explained the management of trash and soil and recyclables. We worked with the community. We actually changed, with Public Works, Michael Dennehy's group, changed the collection schedule. Originally it was 3 times a week was trash, once was recycling, but after we had finished this program, it turned into twice a week for trash and twice a week for recycling. So to that point, it's more about education, making sure that you're aware of what you're doing. There are some very simple things that can be done. If you have a question, please call 311. They'll put you in touch with our office. Our inspectors will come out and talk to neighborhood groups, civic groups about some of the things. We do this pretty regularly. And we really encourage people to use the 311 app. If you see something that looks like a rat problem, or you think you see a rat, take a picture of it. Send it in to us through the app. It automatically locates on a GIS pattern of where it is. We're immediately able to dispatch inspectors, and they're out and they'll go into the stores and do baiting and trapping and things like that.
And of course, the other thing is that if you find your trash is getting ripped open by skunks or raccoons, I guess that's a sign that it's probably going to be available to smaller creatures.
Oh, absolutely. It's really funny. Some of the animals that don't coexist, like mice and rats, don't live in the same world. So people will tell me that they're infested with mice, and I say, well, it could be worse because it could be rats. But if you have mice, you're not going to have rats. But it's to be obvious. I mean, covering your trash is huge. Keep the barrels away from the building, a foot or two. Very important. Try to keep them on hard surfaces, little stone pads or things like that. Make it, less desirable for rats.
Just one brief update. There was a crackdown on some supermarkets not too long ago. Anything resulting from that?
Yeah, actually, as usual, when we do something, the residual things are the things we didn't anticipate, but we're very happy with. I constantly get reports now from constituents about they're in different markets, and they see the cleaning process taking place. We see there were aprons at the bottom of the shelves. They're all being removed now from stores because that seemed to be a spot that was of great concern. So we had the one event that we had to deal with, very aggressively, but the residual effect is a lot of the supermarkets now are all taking that cue and cleaning it up.
Well, finally, if people want to check out the registration information online, what's the best way to go after that?
You can go right on the city website, cityofboston.com, or again, you can go to the 311 and they can walk you through actually going online with the system. But you can Google it and it'll go right up.